hello, Horizon family and friends, neighbors. We're here again. I have a privilege of interviewing my friend, my senior pastor, because you're senior, Jim Stevenson. And for the last 2.5 years, we've just had this great privilege, at least it's been a privilege for me, I hope it has for you, of every other week preaching on and off, sharing the pulpit. And right now we're in the middle of a series called Walking with Jesus. Last Sunday's sermon was really encouraging to my heart. If you haven't listened to it, please go find it online, where Jim talked about faith and the centurion and how he believed and what God does through men of faith and how he encourages them. That's where we've been. It was a great sermon. I want you to go listen to it if you haven't. But now we are carrying on, and we'll be in this series for another month and a half. And it caused me to want to ask a question to you, Jim. So out of all the Jesus stories, what's your favorite?
Well, that's a good question. You know, I think most people, most pastors, most leaders might say the prodigal son, Luke 15. There's a story there of a lost coin, a lost sheep, and a lost son. Dostoevsky said that's the most beautiful short story ever composed. Came from the lips of Jesus, obviously. But in terms of his engagement with people, I'd have to say, Joe, that for me, at least at this point in my life, and for the past few years, it's been Jesus when he's engaged by that Canaanite woman in Matthew 15, the Syrophoenician woman, because she's got nothing, and she is determined to get to Jesus. And she's a single mom, apparently. There's no mention of a husband or anything. It seems that she's probably spent all her resources trying to get her daughter healed. And as far as a Jewish rabbi is concerned, she's got the wrong face, she's got the wrong race, and she's from the wrong place. And I brought that out in the sermon that I preached a few weeks ago. But I wanted to include that story, that favorite story of mine, in this series because it means so much to me that she would not be deterred. The disciples really tried to prevent her from getting to Jesus, and yet she was resourceful. And in the end, Jesus tells her that you've got great faith, woman. And she's very clever. When he tells her that the bread is for the children, it's not for the dogs, and he had come for the children of Israel, and she says, well, even the dogs get to eat the crumbs that fall from the table. That's a poignant saying. It still is very heartwarming, heartbreaking, really, when you think about her situation, that she was able to reply to him that way. Of course, he was bringing this out of her. He knew all along her heart, and he was able to teach his disciples doing it. But I think that story is fabulous. For single moms out there that sometimes you feel like you're at the end of your rope, you keep calling out to Jesus. He will hear you.
All right, so the next question I have today, it goes in a little bit different direction. Jesus Christ is still alive, we know that. And so maybe the disciples would have remembered that day and said, oh, we want to tell you about a memory we have, and maybe they would have told that story. Well, the same Jesus Christ that was alive then is alive now, and he's working through disciples today, disciples at Horizon Church. So as you now rehearse a little bit and think back through 23 years, there has got to be some notable events and memories that you have of what Jesus has done here. What comes to mind?
Well, I think first of all of that first membership class, there were about 100 of us, I think, at the Core. We met at Furman Conference Center. It was a beautiful weekend, and we had an evening meal, and we, for several hours, just presented the vision, the hope, the dreams of Horizon Church. And there was a lot of enthusiasm. You know, when a church plant has a lot of energy, it has a lot of big dreams. And so that, of course, has to be a very fond memory for me, too. I think that every sacrament that I've had the privilege of administering has been very meaningful to me. Whether it's the Lord's Supper, whether it's been the baptism of perhaps an infant, a child, or an adult. You know, I had the privilege of baptizing one of my friends at 80 years of age. That's the oldest. And, of course, many of the children of the folks who have come to Horizon, and others who have come as adults. So it's been a great privilege with those sacraments. I remember Horizon Lights we did for a number of years, and we were able to have this fabulous fireworks show that drew thousands of people, literally. It grew each year. And we, by God's grace, were able to do that. And it was a great outreach, introducing people to our campus, just getting them on the campus to see a little bit about what we're about. Our 10-year anniversary stands out to me. We celebrated at Embassy Suites. We filled that banquet room, and we heard testimonies and reviewed the story of Horizon Church, and again, looked to the future. So that's also another thing that just stands out in my memory. The service projects that we've done with Miracle Hill, Piedmont Women's Center, Homes of Hope. I think too of ESL for years and years, faithfully. We taught folks English. I even got to set in on some Spanish courses that were being taught. So it worked both ways too. So I think of those service projects, and we all pitched in together and did really a couple of massive projects. Just working in the name of the Lord, living out our faith. I think too of the opportunities of seeing people cross that line of faith. For me personally, and they might not have been corporate where people would have seen all that. They'd later seen the lives, but the opportunity to lead people to Christ. As a pastor, we do have certain advantages and certain disadvantages. And sometimes people will be so desperate they feel like they're safe with a pastor, and they'll come share their story, and you have the solution right there that you can point them to from God's Word, and that's the gospel. So those are some of my favorite memories. There are many more. It's sort of like naming friends and saying thanks.
You'll leave somebody out?
I'm going to leave certain events out for sure, but I think of the mission trips that we were able to take with large groups of Horizonites to Ecuador. Several went to Poland, and I've had the privilege of going because of the support of Horizon people to China and India as well. And those mission trips I remember them fondly too. But really, whether we're halfway around the world or right here at home with our families, starting there, or just across the street, we're all on mission. And we are missional people. And we all have stories to tell about what God has done for us and what He can do for others.